NIL is here, but is money truly the number one thing for recruits?
You are Locked On UCF, your daily podcast on the UCF Knights, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome on in to Locked On UCF, your daily UCF podcast. I'm your host, Mike G, and thank you so much for making Locked On UCF your first listen of every day. Joining me as he does every single week is my good friend Brian Smith from Locked On the Portal. Brian, you talk to these recruits. You're out there at the camps. We're starting the show with a simple topic. Today we're going to cover all things money, man, whether money is number one, how schools need to manage money, and what that money management looks like. But we're going to start with a simple question. Is money number one for recruits in major college football? In the Power Four conferences, which UCF is in the Big 12, is money the number one thing you think that athletes care about in their recruitment?
No, and that's resounding no. It's still relationships. It's ironic that you're asking me that on today's podcast because I had a conversation with somebody yesterday that could have picked any school. We're talking about recruits and all the different options they have. He didn't pick the program with the most cash. This is a kid that's top 100, top 150 kid in the class of 25. So it was relationship based and there was money involved, but you have to be competitive with it. If you're competitive, like if I just use easy math, somebody offers $100K, and most of these deals are a lot more than that. But the school that you like better, have better relationships with, if they offer 70, you got a shot. If you're lowballing guys, then that's a wrap. It's over for you because they'll feel disrespected, and then mom and dad ain't happy, and then that's just snowball in the wrong direction.
That's interesting that you say that. So you're saying if the money's close, it still comes down to relationships, just like before. Look, we saw Nick Saban quit college coaching because he said, my message no longer resonates, Brian, with these recruits. He was preaching development and an opportunity to get to the NFL, which he was successful at, more successful at it than probably any college coach in the history of college football. So now you're in a situation where money's flying everywhere and they're having trouble corralling it. But I've said this too. I think at the major programs, you can tell me whether you agree or not. The money's pretty equal. If you're a top 50 recruit, the money's going to be pretty equal everywhere you go because the market sets the rate and people understand that to talk to this kid, you need $1 million.
Yeah, there's a lot of that. And it depends on the specific position. You get into priority positions like D tackle, quarterback, and corner, then it gets crazy. Then it's more about not just how much you offer, how much of it is up front and guaranteed. You get into really finite details. But overall, for the majority, and we both know the programs here, there are about 15, 20 schools that think they can compete for titles consistently, and UCF's trying to get to that level. Do you overspend on a kid to make a splash? There's so many questions that you get into, and that'll go into our next topic with the GM here in a minute. But you have to be able to spend for the top kids or you're out the door. Again, though, bottom line, to get into that conversation, if you're not making mom happy, the head coach at the school happy, obviously the player, like the sister, relationships, say that about 50 times and you're still not done. I mean, do you feel comfortable? Think about it. If like you're Bama, they recruited national. Let's just use them as an example. They were getting kids from California, South Florida, New Jersey, everywhere. Alabama's a long way. Even though it's Nick Saban, are you going to send your kid all that way if you don't have a good relationship with that staff and you're like a mom? Like, really? Are you going to do that?
Yeah.
Because money's coming in from all angles. You're right. So it's still relationships that really matter the most.
I think if you're Scott Frost, you're elated to know that relationships still matter because you may not have as much money and I'm talking in conference here, as BYU is loaded. The money flying around there is crazy. We saw Kenny Dillingham practically with his hand out saying, look, we're doing this thing, but please give us money. I think to stay ahead of the curve, the Big 12 is going to have to find these dollars to be able to give to athletes. And it starts with hitting that $20.5 million cap. We covered this on another show, but UCF is dissolving their collective, the Kingdom. into the university structure, and they're saying, hey, they're calling it a competitive success fund, where they will have take that money that was going to their collective and redirect it so that they have complete control over it. Now, for UCF, success will depend on how much of that $20.5 million coffer you can fill, so that when your quarterback prospect comes along and the market says this guy's worth $3 million, you have $3 million to give him. I just don't. I don't see any other way around it. And once you have that three, once you fulfill that requirement, it goes back to what you're talking about, which is relationships, opportunity, development. Do I like the school? Do they have my major? Is this the right program for me? I think that this is where NIL was always supposed to be. Take care of the athletes financially, but make the decision about where to go to school, about what program is best for you.
I agree 100%, Mike. Look, you can be happy with the check that's getting cut, and there's nothing wrong with money. Okay, let me be upfront about that. There's nothing wrong with some cash in your pocket. But if you're going to go to a school solely because of the money, are you really going to be there for 2, 3, 4 years? I'm not going to get into specifics, but I already know some guys that have left schools that took the quote unquote bigger money and they out the door. And it screwed up some recruiting classes, because those programs that, like, especially if it's, again, D tackle, corner, quarterback, if you miss at those spots, what happens on game day, Mike? Does that go well for you?
No. Games are won and lost in the trenches. Yep.
Yeah. And then, of course, quarterback's self-explanatory. But so you take the kid, you get him for a year, start to develop him. He's not happy. He leaves. So you not only don't get him to hit for you, you didn't take somebody else. It's a double whammy. So just buying kids, note to the programs that think that works, they're seeing it doesn't always go so well. Florida State went through that last year. How'd that go for Florida State? Like, they went out and took some kids they missed from the high school ranks, but they just grabbed them out of the portal that missed at Bama and Georgia. Almost all of them were total flops. You got to go with production. Don't just pay kids. It causes problems in the back with the locker room. So again, this is to UCF's advantage. You need kids that are going to fit your culture. Scott's been there before, so I don't think he's going to have a hard time adjusting to the UCF Knights again. And he's also got to get kids that understand, okay, we're in a big city school. We're a massive institution. Here's what we can do for you. This is what we're competitive. Okay, we're not going to give you as much as Ohio State or Oregon, but we're competitive and we fit you. If the kid doesn't want to come with that, look, bro, they're better off to cut bait, because the kid's not going to stick anyway.
Yeah.
And even if he does, he's probably going to have that third uncle walking into your office. I don't know if Urban Meyer talked about that on his podcast recently. He's like, stay away from the third uncle. And I know exactly what he's talking about. Putting out fires.
Well, the money is certainly flying, Brian, but do they need a expert to help them management, not only with the money, but with player personnel? We're going to talk about that right after a quick word from our sponsors. This episode of Locked On UCF is brought to you by our friends at Monarch Money. Ever check your bank account and wonder, where did all my money go? Between dining out, online shopping, and entertainment, it's easy to lose track. That's where Monarch Money comes in. Your personal CFO, giving you full visibility and control over your finances. Monarch Money isn't just a budgeting app. It's a complete financial command center. You can track all your accounts, investments, and spending in one place. So you stop just managing your money and start building wealth. They have surprising insights. It's very convenient and easy collaboration with a partner or somebody helping you manage that will help you get you there financially. Take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use code LOCKEDONCollege at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. That's monarchmoney.com. Use code Locked On College for 50% off at Monarch Money. Also, this episode of Locked On UCF is brought to you by our friends at Game Time. Game Time Sports, helping you have the most fun watching your favorite sport. Imagine watching your favorite team live, feeling the energy of the crowd, and witnessing unforgettable moments. There's nothing like experiencing big game in person, guys. Getting tickets shouldn't be stressful. That's where Game Time comes in, making it easier than ever to grab last-minute seats at unbeatable prices. Look, Game Time Picks curation makes it easier to find better value for tickets to sports, concerts, comedies, and theater. Easy ticket shopping. I just checked the Game Time app, and there are amazing deals on some huge matchups coming up. And if you are watching the NCAA tournament, you know right now I'm at round 1 of the tournament, and tickets are easier with Game Time, guys. You can get super deals, super low prices, and peace of mind with seat views before you buy, no surprise fees, and a low price guarantee that you can book with total confidence. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. That's code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Brian, it's changing, and we detailed that in the first segment, how it's changing. But I think that UCF may need to bring in not only a money manager, but a true player personnel person. Look, we see this during the NFL draft. GMs are sitting at a round table with a board, and we see colleges do a version of this in recruiting. But with the money involved, if you're telling me I have $20.5 million to spend, and I believe that's across all sports, so that's not just football. That's, a guy who's going to say, hey, here's our football GM. And he says, look, of the 20.5, because football is the revenue driver, we need 12 million of the pot. Basketball is going to come back and say, that's ridiculous. We need 10 million of the pot. I think you're going to have money and player personnel advocates for each program to be able to accurately assess what they need financially to compete in their conference, do market research on what that is, know what that number is, and then divvy out the money to the student athletes, Brian, as it may be. Because if you only have $10 million to spend, and that quarterback's going to cost you $4 million, how do you manage the rest of your roster? I'm not sure that a lot of college coaches have had to deal with this.
Let me tell you how you manage the rest of it. Very poorly. That ain't enough. And we both know it. That means you're going to be fired soon. That's what that means. So what you're asking is for like the GM position. Let me give you an example. Notre Dame hired Mike Martin from the Detroit Lions. Like, they were abysmal for decades. He helped build that roster. Then Notre Dame got him to come over in their GM role. He wanted to change. Well, if you can do it at that level, you can probably do it at college. You're seeing a lot of NFL down, and it doesn't have to be like their high-end GM guy, but somebody that understands player personnel, and they can do what you just said, put a number with it, and they're going to have staff that helps them with this, and that's part of this too. You're going to have to expand the staff under that GM, under that personnel manager, and you need a recruiting coordinator too. Not one or the other, both. It's expensive. But if you don't spend that money up front, you're going to miss on players. You're going to misevaluate how much the NIL is going to be for the market. Like you said, if you miss on NIL with the quarterback market and you try to go out there and get somebody, it's not going to end well, Mike. It's not going to end well at all. So you have to have that. Everybody has their own opinion on how they want to do it, but that's the trend. And it's people that have dealt with the money side of this before. So the NFL is the hot way to go. You might get somebody that's the top scout for the Falcons or something like that to come in for but you need both. And when you do it, this is what I've been told from the SEC perspective. It's going to be 14 or more for the football program. And that's when I heard the number at 22 million.
Ooh.
Now that if it's 20.5 and that's what it ends up being, of course, I don't trust politics at all to come up with anything. I trust neither side in that in any way, shape, or form. But if it's 20.5, so maybe it goes down to about 13. But that's still about 2/3 of the money, Mike. That's a big chunk. How much can UCF do? Because they're trying to be competitive in more sports, and they're broadening it. You and I talked about that off air. They're adding scholarships because football now is going from 85 to 105. There's all kinds of weird stuff with it. You got to be really careful. So if you don't hire a GM, and to your point, I love this, having somebody doesn't have to be somebody came from the NFL or NBA or something, but every sport needs somebody that tracks NIL, what the trends are, and they have a little cabinet of people that go through and figure it out. Okay, this player for our program, they exceeded expectations. Be proactive. Don't be reactive. Give them a little extra. That'll help you on the recruiting trail. That'll build a bond with programs around that you're recruiting from, etc. But you need somebody in place to do it, because if you don't, and your competition is USF or whoever, how's that going to go? You're going to lose.
Yeah.
You're going to lose.
Yeah, I agree. I think if this responsibility, Brian, has to fall to the athletic directors, it's going to be a disaster. If I'm Terry Mohajer, the first thing I'm doing is I'm hiring an expert to come in to assess the situation. And then
Absolutely.
I'm going to have that guy hire 7 more guys to cover football and my Olympic sports and say, hey, okay, here's your guy. This guy's going to work with my guy, and we're going to figure out this budget thing, because everybody thinks they need a bigger slice than they probably actually need. And that 20.5 is going to spend like that. Now, one of the things that we talked about before we started recording was the idea that even though UCF is dissolving the collective, that money is not necessarily all going to be in this 20.5 cap. They're going to find creative ways to back funnel that cash to athletes, because once you hit the cap, or if you've decided football only gets 10, and we're trying to be fair, but they actually need 15, well, we still got to get them to 15, Brian.
This is where it becomes really interesting. And it's just bottom line, who are your big money boosters? And can you, in addition to have somebody that can write a 7-figure check, can you get people together to form little collectives that UCF might tell somebody, hey, they can have a visit with a kid. If you want extra, you want to do something, this guy that runs a car dealership, this guy that owns a financial firm, whatever, this is free enterprise.
Right.
There's a kid that I told you about. His name's Messiah Hampton. He's a big-time recruit out of New York. He's visiting schools all over the place. He's already got a car dealership advertisement that's on X and everything else. He's done a full-on commercial. That's not set up through any school. He's still in high school. I mean, you can do this in a lot of ways, but if it's a booster for your school and he says, if you sign with us, I'm going to let you advertise for my car dealership, do you think the parents or the kids going to care? No. Are they getting money? So you're absolutely right. You've got to find creative ways to at least point them in the right direction and put 2 people together. Then you can leave the room. It's up to them to make the deal, but they go set that up. And it's honestly, it's a great life learning skill. Every school should want to do that. College is about figuring out how to make your money work for the rest of your life. So this is a great skill anyway. So to be clear, and what Mike was saying, you're going to get 20.5 overall from the house settlement. Football is going to get the lion's share. I think we can all assume that. But it may not be enough. Even at Georgia, some years, there might be a situation, they got a quarterback problem. They got to go in the portal.
Yeah.
That's going to eat it up, bro. You already know. We talk about this stuff all the time. It's like $3 million for an elite quarterback in the portal. I think going forward will be chump change.
Yeah, look, at the end of the day, you have to feed your moneymaker, which for most Power 4 colleges is football. And without football, those Olympic sports don't exist. And I can't stress that enough. This is why football is going to get the first pick in most situations. Now, you have outliers like maybe Duke, where basketball is king.
Kansas,
North Carolina. Yeah, right. But for the most part, it's going to be football. Without football, you can't have the other sports, because I don't think, Brian, people realize how few athletic departments around the country actually make money.
They don't
make money. And the numbers, you'd be surprised. We did this over at the War Report talking about Auburn, in the 2024 year. I mean, you think the profits from a program like that would be astronomical? $11 million. That's all they produced in profit as an athletic department. That's crazy. And, to underline that, football produced $60 million in profit.
So everybody
and
else
the athletic department at $11 million in profit. So of the 60, the other sports ate $50 million in profit. It takes football in most cases to make it happen, brother. And I'm telling you, they've got to feed. Cash is king. Football has been king in college sports. I think that continues. Great conversation here. But look, how do you balance the budget? I think that is going to be something that these GMs that we're talking about potentially have to deal with. We'll talk about that right after a quick word from our sponsors. This episode of Locked On UCF is brought to you by our friends at 5 Hour Energy. Daylight savings snuck up on us again, and if you're feeling that lost hour of sleep, 5 Hour Energy has your back. The extra sunshine means more time for fun, but sometimes you need a little boost to power through. I'm covering the NCAA tournament right now, and I'm telling you, I'm popping 5-hour energies like crazy to get through it. Whether you stay up late watching the NCAA tournament, squeezing in a round of golf after work, or just trying to keep up with your busy day, 5-hour energy gives you that quick, refreshing pick-me-up whenever you need it. Basketball madness is here. I've been staying up late watching the games live in person, and 5-hour energy helps me keep up the next day. Head to 5hourenergy.com and find over 15 flavors to choose from, including watermelon, blueberry, blue raspberry, and peach mango. You can even build your own 12-pack or 24-pack delivered right to your door. Need one now? Grab a 5-hour energy shot at your local grocery store or convenience store. They're everywhere. Stock up today. And guys, stay energized.
The NCAA tournament is here, and so is the Bracket Breakdown.
Locked On Podcast Network and Amazon Fire TV channels are teaming up to deliver NCAA tournament coverage like never before. Watch studio shows featuring former players and Locked On's local experts as they guide you through every upset, buzzer beater, and bracket matchup.
Stream it all for free on Amazon Fire TV channel. Search Bracket Breakdown to see it all for free.
It's your team every day.
Balancing the budget, as we mentioned, $20.5 million across all the sports. Now, they're adding 74 scholarships to the Olympic sports, which I think is great. More opportunities for kids to play sports and get an education while doing it. I'm never not going to be an advocate for that, Brian. But you've got to figure out how to keep other sports viable without robbing from the thing that keeps the lights on, which we mentioned just before the break, is football in most cases. If you're trying to build a basketball program, for example, what kind of challenges do you foresee for these schools in saying, hey, look, we have to keep the lights on at football, even if they're doing poorly because of ticket sales and seats and interest and how they drive revenue. But we got to continue to build our basketball program, which I think is going to be a big talk at UCF. Johnny Dawkins had a rough year. He's going to need help in the portal, and that means money. And they've got to decide what kind of slice of the pie he's going to get versus Scott Frost, who they just made a huge investment to bring back to Orlando.
Yeah, they need closers. And what I mean by that is we discussed a few minutes ago how there's the 20.5. That's the big pot, right? Well, you still have these collectors and boosters. That's where this comes in. Private investment is still the bottom line. There is no change in that. What they call it might be different, but if it's a $20 bill, Mike, it's still a $20 bill. If it's $1 million check, Mike, it's still $1 million check. You need that coming in. It's coming down to private, and especially for UCF, which from what I've been told by people that do NIL business side of this is not in the upper echelon of the P4, and I'm being kind. They're going to need more individual investment. A lot more if they want to climb the ladder in football. Now, as you noted, that impacts Dawkins and really every other athletic event, sport, coach, player, trainer, because they all have more money to pull for them. And it's called the bubble. Like getting guys on campus, getting people on campus that donate a lot of money, that bubble, it's not in your, like how much money you made, but it's just donations. That's really where it comes to. Texas, schools like that. Can you imagine what the bubble is at Texas being an oil school? Like, come on, it's got to be crazy.
Yeah.
UCF's got to find one of those. And I'm sure they talk about it daily. If they're going to climb, they got to get that, because if you really, and like you said, I'm all for the Olympic sports going up, but it costs more money. Who's paying for it? And Dawkins, if he's going to get up the ladder and move UCF basketball up, I mean, it shouldn't be that hard to recruit to Orlando, by the way. You still need to get somebody out of the portal with a 7-figure check. Well, do you have it to pull from? There's a lot of talk about Dawkins for years about whether he should be the coach, but if you buy him out, you got to pay for the contract and stuff too. That's the same thing. So I really think it comes down to, again, we got to have GMs and all this for all these sports to find the right people, but you're going to need more contributions from your boosters. There's no ifs, ands, or buts around it. And that's an awkward conversation, but it's just true.
Yeah, I agree. I agree. Look, at the end of the day, this is going to be an ongoing conversation in college sports. So, they're going to have to figure out, hey, how do I do this? How do I make the most of this situation with the money that we have? And, it comes back to how quickly can we fill those $20.5 million coffers so that we can move on to how we, again, get to what our real cap is, which is could be $40 million. You just got to find a way to creatively fund around that cap. I'll be interested if that sparks any new legislation. But look, I foresee some other things developing from this in that they may mandate that a certain amount of NIL dollars go to each sport. That might be something that we see come out of this. They say, hey, like you can't give basketball less than $5 million of this cap. So you may want to make sure that not that everybody gets a share of the pie, right? Or they may say, hey, for revenue generating sports or sports in the black, you get X percentage. So many things I think still left to work out here. Either way, UCF is ahead of the curve, trying to make sure that they understand it. And this is what so many schools failed to do when NIL was first introduced because of the confusion and the lack of uniform direction about what to do in college sports. States were handling it differently. Colleges were handling it differently. Conferences were handling it differently. If you're a UCF, you can't afford, you plan for every contingency and you get ahead of it. Brian Smith from Locked On the Portal. Before we get out of here, I want to thank you for joining me. Tell people where they can find you.
Yeah, man, this is just like UCF's podcast here, Locked On UCF, wherever you get your pods, whether it's YouTube, Spotify, Apple, Odyssey, we are there as well. Locked On the Portal. If you're on YouTube in particular, just the Portal Podcast, at the Portal Podcast. So it's a lot of fun recruiting, NIL, and transfer portal each and every day.
Guys, that's it for another great edition of Locked On UCF. Thank you for making us your first listen of every day. For your next listen, head on over to Locked On Big 12. Our guy Drake Toll leads the conversation and conference realignment news and pulls no punches when it comes to talking about every team in the Big 12, including the UCF Knights. You can find Locked On Big 12 on YouTube or wherever you listen to your podcast. And you can find us here tomorrow on Locked On UCF.